Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of This Week in British History with me, Philippa Lacey-Brule from British History Tours. And this week we're going to look at some of the events which happened between the 22nd and the 28th of June. Now, when I get to 100, not 100, I'm a little bit past 100. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to start another mini-series on the monarchy of England and then subsequently Great Britain and how we got from one monarch to the next. And all the interesting stories that are linked to that, how the successions happened. There's so much stuff that we could cover. It's going to be a really interesting series. So once I hit 1,000 subscribers, I will begin that series. So please, if you haven't already subscribed, but you're enjoying these videos, then please do subscribe and maybe share this with your friends, anyone who likes history. I would really appreciate it. But right, this week, we're going to look, like I say, at events that happened between the 22nd and the 28th of June. And just before I get started, I forgot to mention, these come out weekly on a Sunday as a sort of summary of the previous week, the week up to the day. But if you'd like a more daily hit of history, then please come and find me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm trying to use Pinterest a bit more, so you can find the links to all of those profiles in the show notes. But right, now let's get on to the history. Let's start on the 22nd of June 1675, when the Royal Greenwich Observatory was set up by Charles II. Now, you may have seen, or we may have talked about the Royal Greenwich before, because we've talked about Greenwich Palace and the fact that there isn't the Greenwich Palace that the Tudors would have known, that was the birthplace of a number of monarchs. The death, Edward VI died there, Anne Boleyn was arrested there, but there is nothing really of the palace to see. I know some people will disagree with that, but really if you go to the site you won't see a Tudor palace there. And the Royal Greenwich Observatory is high up on the hill from the site where Greenwich Palace was, and you can see it, and it actually looks more Tudorish, if you like. And I have been told by a guide on an official guide from Greenwich that is because the Royal Observatory is built out of some of the bricks from the Tudor Palace, which was demolished, and that is why it looks like it. You look at it and you think, well, I know that's not Tudor, but it kind of looks Tudor. Has it got a Tudor link? Well, there's your Tudor link. It is the bricks that were used to build it. But anyway, we're talking about the Royal Observatory, so let me go back to that. And it was founded by Charles II, 1675, as I say. This is a time where we didn't have a way of measuring longitude. We didn't have standardised time, but shipping and voyages overseas were very, very important, and there was much benefit to be gained from understanding the skies, how we could read them, how we could use them to locate ourselves, that kind of thing. So this was not just an amusement for a king. This had very tangible benefits to the country, to especially anything to do with going out onto the sea. So the need for the observatory was rather to gather astronomical information in sufficient quantities now, and accuracy, I suppose, hence the need to be in one position, to have an actual permanent place to watch the skies. And for that data to be in sufficient quantity, have the accuracy, and therefore be able to apply that to navigation, cartography and timekeeping. And as I've said, there was also this wish to learn how are we going to actually measure longitude. The astronomer in charge was given the title Astronomer Royal, and the first man to hold that position was someone called John Flamsteed. He went on to produce over 3,000 star charts with his assistant Edmund Halley, or Halley. We've covered Edmund Halley before. He is the Halley of Halley's Comet, or Halley's Comet, depending on which way you pronounce it. We've covered him actually in previous episodes of this, and he was the assistant to the first Astronomer Royal, and indeed he did become Astronomer Royal himself. 100 years later, and Greenwich started to publish the Nautical Almanac, which established Greenwich as the baseline for all longitudinal calculations. This publication was really popular among navigators, not surprisingly so, I suppose, if it gave them the ability to measure longitude, measure where they were around the globe. And that helped in no small part to the adoption of Greenwich as zero longitude. And we also, of course, have Greenwich Mean Time, which is the starting point of all international time zones. I have to tell you before I go on, I am sweltering today. England is having a heat wave. It's like the weather knows that COVID is going on and we all need a little bit of warmth, I don't know, the ability to go outside. And it's piggybacking torrential rain and really hot days, and today is a rather hot, muggy day. So if I look like I'm sweating, I'm afraid it's because I am. how pleasant. Anyway, so on to the next thing. 24th of June, and we're going right back now to 1314. I think that sounds the right way to say it. And it's the Battle of Bannockburn. A Scottish army led by Robert the Bruce made a full-on attack on the English army led by Edward II at Bannockburn. Now, according to the sources that I've been reading, the battle waged for 2 days, which sounds incredible to me. So anyone who knows more about Scottish history, please feel free to put in the comments some more information. I'm not here to pretend that I know absolutely everything about every other part of history. What I want to do is introduce people every week to some of the events which happened in history. So I'm perfectly happy, please, to for other people who are experts and know a bit more about me about any of these topics, please feel free to put things in the comments. I would always ask that it's done in a respectful way. A number of English nobles were captured during the battle, and so Edward II did an exchange and returned to Robert the Bruce his wife, his daughter, and his sister, who had been kept in prison, in imprisonment in England for 8 years by this point. And the Scottish victory at the Battle of Bannockburn established Scotland as again an independent state. Not that that was the end of that, unfortunately, the fighting that then went on afterwards, but it did lead eventually to a treaty in 1328 called the Treaty of Edinburgh and Northampton. Under that treaty, the English crown recognised Scotland as an independent kingdom and Robert the Bruce and his heirs as rightful heirs to the throne of Scotland. We're going to skip forward another 200 years now to 1509, 24th of June, again, 1509 this time, and it's the joint coronation of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Their coronation took place at Westminster Abbey, and it's interesting to think now, Henry VIII is famous for many things, but obviously infamous for having 6 wives, but only 2 of them, in fact, had a coronation, Catherine of Aragon and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Now for a juicy one, the 25th of June, 1483, and King Edward V, the boy king, the son of Edward IV, who is also Henry VIII's grandfather. No, it's all getting a bit... We'll do that one in the succession one. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll explain it more. But Edward V was declared illegitimate by the Houses of Lords and Commons. The grounds for that declaration of his illegitimacy, and therefore couldn't be king, was that his parents' marriage had been bigamous, because Edward IV had apparently had a pre-contract with someone else when he married Elizabeth Woodville. Edward V's protector had been his uncle, who now took the throne as Richard III. And Edward V is, of course, one of the famous princes in the Tower. He, along with his younger brother, the Duke of York, were being kept at the Tower of London. Nothing so strange about that initially. That is where all monarchs had gone traditionally to spend the night or the preparations before their coronation. However, they were kept there and famously disappeared. No one knows what happened to them. The Victorians, while doing work at the Tower of London, found bones at the bottom of a stairwell, and it was assumed that these were the bones of Edward and his brother. Now, they are interred in Westminster Abbey, and actually, I suppose without any scientific investigation of the bones, it can't really be said whether or not these are the bones of the princes in the tower. And so without an explanation, there are lots of different theories as to what happened to the boys. And there are a few great books about Richard III, about the disappearance of the prince in the tower, and I will find some of them for you and put those links in the show notes so that you can go and investigate that and have a look and make up your own mind. If you have any theories on it that you wish to share, again, please respectfully in the comments, that would be fab. On the 27th of June 1743, George II became the last British monarch to lead British troops into battle. The battle against the French on German soil was part of a war for the Austrian succession, which was trying to preserve the succession of a woman to the Austrian throne, Maria Theresa. Now, that may seem like quite a noble cause, but at the time it caused much controversy, not because he was trying to support a woman coming to the throne of any of the European countries, but because he was seen to be acting in the interests of his native Hanover. The critics had some cause for concern, seeing as George decided to wear a yellow Hanoverian sash into battle. However, the official portrait has George wearing a more British royal blue sash. Okay, let's do something that's not war or royals for a moment. Yay, something a bit different. 27th of June 1967, and the world's, it says here, world's, certainly Britain's first ATM, automatic. What does ATM stand for? Cash machine. Automatic? Somebody tell me. First cash machine, anyway, put in Enfield in London. And 2 years later, America got its first ATM machine. We're going to finish off this week with another coronation, the 28th of June 1461, and the coronation of Edward IV. We've already talked about his son, Edward V, one of the princes in the Tower, and his grandson, Henry VIII, who also had his coronation in This Week in History. Edward IV was a Yorkist king in the times of the Wars of the Roses against the Lancastrian side, and he had had a decisive victory over the Lancastrians at the Battle of Towton, and now was declared king and had his coronation at Westminster Abbey. Now, the coronation was well received by the general population because they thought and they hoped this was the end to what had been a long, bloody civil war. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of This Week in British History. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And if you leave a comment, then I will get round to your comments. I do answer to all comments eventually. I apologise if I'm a bit delayed, but please do feel free to do that. And perhaps share it if you found it interesting and you think other people will too. I would really appreciate that. But for now, until next week, take care, have a great week. I'll see you next time.